$3,000 a year. Well, in that year, I think it was 48, Rod Serling and Earl Hamner Jr. both won. They both got trips for them and their wives to New York. They both got $500. They were interviewed live by Dr. Christian himself on the show, and then their scripts were produced and aired a few months later. So Earl Hamner Jr., by the way, had written many Twilight Zones, if you're familiar with him, but he also had won that award 2 years prior. So he was quite a writer even in the young days with Rod. So, I tried to touch on a lot of things before. What do we have for questions? Anybody have any specific questions? If they're Twilight Zone related and I can't answer them, I'll push them off onto Martin with his book. Yes?
I'm just wondering if he had any opinion about One Step Beyond, the TV show.
I haven't met, a lot of people thought he might have been involved with it, which he wasn't. And I've been asked that before. I've never tracked down in all of my research where he's made any comment other than no, I wasn't part of the series. And it's funny because a lot of people think he was associated with Hitchcock too, and his show followed the Hitchcock half hours, and there was definitely no tie in there either. Yes, way in the back.
Would you give us a brief history of Rod's return to radio with Zero Hour?
Yeah, the 0 Hour series, he was hired near the end of his life to do the, about like every 5 minutes, intros and exits in between the commercial breaks and stuff. And there must be, 180 of them or so? There's a lot of them. You're the expert on radio, so you might know, but, he had no, real writing or anything. He was like a host that would just show, or do the speaking parts for intros and exits. I bought them to listen to some. I'm not going to sit there and listen to them all because there's very little Serling involvement. But I'm glad you brought that up because let's touch briefly on Night Gallery. Now, Night Gallery, actually, the person that talked him into writing the Night Gallery was Sammy Davis Jr. And Sammy Davis had read Rod's book on Witches and Warlocks. There were 3 stories in there, which became the pilot movie for Night Gallery. So the book is dedicated to Sammy Davis. And Rod Serling envisioned it as Rod Serling's House of Wax. And he would come out and unveil a wax statue, but it turned into the paintings that they would unveil and work with. And they made it clear when they hired him that it was going to be called Rod Serling's Night Gallery, but you're going to be the host and narrator a little bit. But beyond that, you're not going to have any control whatsoever. The young producer, Jeff Laird, they had a real hate relationship. And so Rod was instructed he had to write most of the first season. The first season was only 6 weeks, so he did write, I believe, 9 of the segments. If you remember them, some had 2 or 3 segments, some had 4 or 5, some were really short. And for season 2, he ended up writing 20 segments. But by season 3, Jeff Laird said, don't even submit another script. I'm not going to read them. I'll throw them in the garbage. But Rod did manage to get 9 segments done. I think it was a total of 39 out of 90. Or 90 or 90-something that Rod had written. So he wasn't too happy with the way Night Gallery went. He hated all those little 1-minute comedy sketches that Jeff Laird was in himself, the Draculas and the Hunchbacks and those. I think they're really funny. I think they're cute. But Rod really, because he had no control over the show. Whereas Twilight Zone, he and his wife together owned 50%, and CBS owned 50%. So he had a lot of control. He wrote specific episodes for specific people he hired. He did some amazing things, and had complete control. But he had no control on the Night Gallery series. So I have him about 20 minutes on the Dick Cavett show. We have a copy of his segment talking about the man and that. And when Night Gallery's brought up, he wasn't too happy about it. Even when I talked to him in '71, that would have been second season. He was, it's okay, So, but there's an episode, 2 episodes, won critical acclaim that Rod wrote for Night Gallery. They're tearing down Tim Riley's bar. Another hometown episode going back to your hometown roots is about the tearing down of the Arlington Hotel in Binghamton, New York. When Rod was a student for 3 years, in like 12, 13, and 14, he was a radio actor and announcer at our local station, WINR, which was in the Arlington Hotel. And then, as he grew up, he was in the bars all the time. Every time he came to town, he frequented there, stayed there. Mom and Dad stayed there when they moved to Binghamton. And so when they were tearing it down, people even begged him to buy the darn place, But, he just wasn't in a position to do that. But that episode is also unique, starring William Wyndham, because it mentions his home address in Binghamton for the main house of all those years, 67 Bennett Avenue. It mentions his friend, Jack Levine, that I showed you in the picture, that became a doctor. No, that's in the Messiah on Mott Street. The doctor with Edward G. Robinson is Dr. Jack Levine. He put in some friends of mine, the McNulty sisters, in Tim Riley's bar. So he was good at not only putting his wife's name, Carol, and Ann and Jody in a lot of Twilight Zones and films, but he put in a lot of his friends' names too. Any other questions? Yes, up here.
You mentioned about he had more control with Twilight Zone. The opening is so iconic, all those images. How specifically involved was he in that opening credit scene? Did he design it? Did he suggest it, or did he have...
No, I don't think it had anything to do with the graphics and the designs. I've read some about the person that actually did the layout for the titles and things, but and nor did he have anything to do with the music. But when it came to actual production values, Martin can tell you more than I, that he had his hands on everything. As a matter of fact, we just got a still recently of a publicity still from Eye of the Beholder with her and Donna Douglas and the mask coming off, and Rod is seen adjusting the mask on the lady in the bed. And, you know, that's an interesting story, because I don't remember her name, but if you have the DVD box set, the lady that was hired to play that part, and she's interviewed herself, and they said right as they got ready to shoot, "You're too ugly to do this part. You can't do it." So they brought in Donna Douglas. But they said, "We'll let you be wrapped up like the mummy in bed through the whole episode, and then when we unwrap it, you'll be Donna Douglas." And the lady told that herself, and I swear she said, they said, "You're too ugly to do this part." But it shows Rod on the set adjusting the bandages and stuff. I mean, he was meticulous for detail. And Martin's book explains something that, you know, that I did not know on the Mighty Casey, the baseball episode, where it had been filmed with Paul Douglas first from Angels in the Outfield, and that he was literally dying of heart attacks on the set, died right a day or two after, wasn't it, Martin? After the production. And there's even a blooper in there where you can see the back of him with his outfit as he's heading off the set, and the other gentleman on the set at the same time. And then the other side note is Robert Sorrells is in prison for murder. And he played the robot baseball player. And he still signs for everybody, but he's not allowed to stock photos or anything. But you are allowed to send into the prison things to get signed, and he sends them back out. As a matter of fact, he just used his credit card and paid for a membership at the Rod Serling Foundation for a year. So, and Anne Francis did that too right before she passed away. And so even though I'm not familiar, involved with the foundation, there's a little rivalry growing because I was so involved 9 years with one, 10 years with here. We're hoping eventually to merge into one. We all want the same thing, to preserve the legacy of Rod Serling. More questions? I saw more hands.
Well, I was just to follow up on Night Gallery. Was one of the elements of dissatisfaction that he had with Night Gallery that the segments often seemed disjointed? It seemed as if material was cut, at least, or edited out of the whatever was shot. And many of the episodes are uneven. Did he express any concern about that? Not
too much, but I do remember when the box sets came out that there's one or two episodes that are missing 2 or 3 minutes here and there. And I think they've been restored and put back in, if I remember right. So there was some of that that's going on. And some do seem very disjointed. And, I'm not into the horror ones more or less. But I have watched them all. And the other classic one that got great reviews was Messiah on Mott Street with Edward G. Robinson. Yeah. Edward G. is one of my favorite actors. And there's an interesting story about him too. But to get down to the show, Rod Serling, being Jewish, had to convert to Unitarianism to marry Carol Serling. So this was done in college. And yet everything Rod wrote that had a Christmas theme was never Jewish, obviously, but it was very fundamental. A lot of the scripts said, you must be born again, you must have Jesus as your Savior. And coming from Rod Serling's pen, I thought that very interesting too. And so the Messiah on Mott Street, you've got the Jewish character, and the little boy has to go out to find the rabbi. They said that God is going to be out on the street, and you'll recognize him, tall and black. This is, of course, it's Yaphet Kotto, the big black gentleman. And so it had elements of Judaism and Christianity, and it's just a wonderful, I love Christmas anything, but it's a wonderful story, and I really enjoy it. Just a 1-minute kickoff on Edward G., because you're all film fans or you wouldn't be here. Edward G. Robinson's first acting performance, according to his autobiography, which I have. First few pages in says, the first time I ever appeared on stage was at the Capitol Theater in Binghamton, New York. It's also the first time I ever had sex, and it was such a bad experience I decided to give it up for life. So if you can picture Edward G. saying that, that's in his own autobiography. I saw some more hands. Yes, ma'am.
I grew up in Syracuse, and we were always told and taught that Rod Serling went to Nottingham High School, which at that point was located on Fellows Ave. Any truth?
Can't be, because he moved to Binghamton when he was about a week after 1 year old.
I figured that. I don't know
Yeah.
why we were
A matter of fact, I've contacted a couple of the temples there and talked to some rabbis. I'm going to make a trip up, and they're going to show me where the grave sites are for Mom and Dad Serling. I want to get pictures. There's a lot of people, we have Rod's gravesite pictures up, but they asked about, Mom and Dad Serling too. And Brother Robert passed away, I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago. His brother Robert was also a writer, and one of his, The President's Plane is Missing, received critical acclaim. And Rod said, I wrote part of that, but I didn't get any credit for it. He didn't want to be involved and take any credit away from his brother Robert. But I did speak to him twice, once at 87 and once about 5, 6 years ago. It was very wonderful, very supportive of what we were doing at our museum. Yes?
You said you didn't think that Rod had anything to do with the music for Twilight Zone. Does that mean that Bernard Herrmann was assigned by CBS and Rod didn't have any real choice in it?
I've never read it. Do you know anything more about that, Martin? I don't.
Buck Houghton was the producer who handled it. He simply hired the musicians.
Yeah, I didn't think Rod had anything to do with bringing in musicians. Although if he had a problem with something, whether it's music or whatever, he'd let you know. And a matter of fact, getting back to the baseball story, the end of the story is Rod would not. He says, you can't air this. He said, Paul Douglas just died. But beyond that, it's terrible. His acting was so bad. He was so sick. He was dying. He says, I want to reshoot the whole thing at a cost of about $50,000, if I believe, around that from Martin's book. And CBS says, no, we're not going to pay that. And Rod paid every penny himself and reshot it. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Good, I remembered something right with Martin's book. More questions? I saw more hands. No, pretty well done. Okay, we're going to cue up 1950, Christmas for Sweeney. Very fun, lighthearted, schmaltzy little Christmas story. We'll follow that with the Insight, really heavy-handed piece. I think you're going to enjoy it if there's enjoyment to be found in the topic of that episode. And we'll end with the 10-minute Night Gallery promo that shows all the stars from the whole series that had been shot up to that point. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your warm welcome. And thank you for your questions. There were some good questions.